the initiative of the British Committee for Iran Freedom, BCFIF, a cross-party group of MPs and peers, along with members of the Anglo-Iranian community, joined together to celebrate the Persian New Year, Nowruz, with a reception in the UK Parliament on March 16. In solidarity with the people of Iran and their organised resistance movement, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, NCRI. NCRI President-elect Mrs. Maryam Rajavi addressed the event in a video message, thanking members of Parliament for their continued support of the Iranian people's resistance and fight for freedom and democracy. Delaying to blacklist the IRGC and delaying to reactivate the UN resolutions will only result in the spread of more terrorism and warmongering abroad and will provide the regime with a chance to obtain nuclear weapons, Mrs. Rajavi said in her remarks. The people of Iran reject all forms of dictatorship, whether it be Shah's regime or religious tyranny. They seek the democratic republic, and there is no doubt this will be achieved, she said.
Let me make it clear. What people are chanting in Iran is down with the dictator Khamenei and down with the oppressor, whether it be the Shah or the supreme leader. No one in Iran is calling for the return of one dictatorship over another. These are two sides of the same coin. You have to remember the Shah was rejected because of the oppression and the suffering of the Iranian people. It was their misfortune that, having rid themselves of the Shah, they fell into the hands of the supreme leader. But no one in Iran is seeking the return of the Shah. There will be some people who would like that because, of course, a country under the control of a puppet leadership like that, possibly allied to the IRGC itself.
The ability for all of us to come together. She raises it because without her voice and all of those tens of thousands of people who are out on the streets every single day in Iran fighting for their lives, for their democracy, we may end up forgetting. So we have to, first of all, unite together to remind ourselves that today, even today, there will be people who will be arrested, imprisoned, tortured, for no other reason but that they want freedom and they want democracy.
And well, let us look forward to the time when Iran will be free and democratic, as opposed to living under oppression. I have a special message to our friends in Ashraf 3, also to Madam Rajavi and all those around the world who celebrate Nowruz. This is, of course, the celebration of the coming of spring. And right now, in this country, possibly maybe a bit too early for spring because the weather isn't too spring-like right now. But let us hope that the coming of spring brings new hope, new vitality, and that millions of Iranians around the world and in Iran can celebrate in style, in time-honoured fashion.
The Iranian resistance and their just struggle for freedom, democracy and human rights in Iran. I think this is something that we welcome because this is something at the root of democracy in this country, one of the oldest democracy in the world. And we welcome this particular approach that Mrs. Rajavi has taken in the number of speeches that I've heard her giving.
And to add my voice to that of previous speakers in support of the brave men and women in Iran. We've gathered here today because we don't just want to celebrate New Year and spring in Iran. We want to celebrate the real spring, the day when Iran is free from the tyrannical rule of the Ayatollahs. And we must not forget that misogyny is central to the regime's domestic repression. The regime has tried to exclude women from shaping the future of their country by suppressing generations of girls in Iran, and it is still ongoing today. But by leading both the organised resistance and the anti-regime uprising for the last 4 decades, the Iranian women are showing the Ayatollahs in Tehran that they will not be denied their inalienable right to define and shape the future of their country. It's in this regard that I want to congratulate and recognise the National Council of Resistance of Iran for the election of Mrs. Maryam Rajavi as its president-elect, setting a clear example for Iranian women's leadership. With her 10-point plan and the other platforms to secure women's rights in the future of Iran, Mrs. Rajavi has shown the women of Iran that you can, you will shoulder responsibility, and that women are indeed the force for change and the guarantor for a democratic Iran.
And if there may be some who try and say, well, this is an internal matter for Iran and we shouldn't trouble ourselves with that. I never accept that interpretation, but they need to also note the very destructive activities of this regime around the world, particularly, of course, in the Middle East and North Africa, with support for terrorist entities, massive arming of the Houthis and of Hezbollah.
Last week, in the House of Lords, I secured a question. I couldn't believe that I was having to ask a question about people spraying chemicals onto girls in schools in Iran. I thought, what sort of people would do a thing like that? And it told me all I need to know about this regime. It told me all I need to know sort of about the heroism and the courage, not least amongst the women of Iran, in standing against this wickedness. And why I do believe that, as my colleague Lord Singh said to you a few minutes ago, that the darkest point is always followed by the brightness of the dawn. And I feel that we are on the cusp of that now. But however long it takes, we must go on standing together. And I want to take this opportunity, therefore, at Nowruz, of saying to the Anglo-Iranian community, but to the people of Iran, to our friends in Ashraf 3, to our friends in all those around the world who are celebrating Nowruz now, I want to wish them all the greetings of this wonderful season of new hope, especially in this room, the Jubilee room. And I always think, what does this mean, even Jubilee? A year of Jubilee is a time when fields will be left fallow to regain their goodness, a time when unfair burdens of debt will be removed, but also it will be a time when those who are unjustly and unfairly held in prisons will be freed.